Yeah, great. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
He just doesn't have Zoom on his phone either, so that's the other issue.
Ah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, he's never had to download it, but I'll talk him through how to do that for next session, just in case.
Yeah. I was I'm just saying to Gary, I was wondering if he's missing other emails from other people, because it may not just be me, but anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, welcome everyone, and look forward to working with you. Obviously, we're going to be working over the next 6 weeks. Now, you can see behind me those books there. I put them there for a reason, because, in fact, each of the sessions are related to the books. I'm still in process of finishing them, by the way. They're not all completed, but so the idea is, so you can understand that there is a sort of there's a book behind. I'm not suggesting you need to go and buy the book or anything. And hopefully I can give you the first book free of charge, which is the Mastering Feedback one, which is what we're doing today. And I'll be sending you out an email at the end of this. And the idea will be that you'll get a copy of the slides, you'll get a copy of the recording. You'll also hopefully get a link to that book. But if it doesn't happen this time, you'll certainly get that link. So but it's certainly up to you whether you wanted to look at the other books, but I just thought that would be part of the package. Okay, so I wondered whether we could just get some quick intros. So Natalia, seeing you've been doing a bit of talking there, you might be warmed up. Can you just tell us a little bit about, you don't have to tell us a huge amount, just tell us what you're doing and, maybe even why you're here. So over to you.
Okay. Long story short, I worked for my father, who unfortunately is supposed to be joining and can't right now. He'll figure that out. He's a McDonald's licensee in Brisbane, so I worked doing his accounting and administration work for 12 years. Then I took a 6-month break off work to go to Los Angeles, and here I am 7 years later. And he's wondering, when am I ever coming back to work? No, but it's been a great opportunity for me. I took some time to, so I never went through to college after high school. Obviously, I was already working full time. So I've taken this time to do some formal education, which has been really, really good. And I've just started my master's, my MBA at a university out here called Pepperdine.
Okay.
And literally just started in January. So 16 more months to go, and it's been the best thing I've ever done. And then when Dad told me about your program, it's sort of in par with what I'm doing. So I thought it'd just be great to join.
Yeah, no, thanks, Natalia. And how are you settling in? Because it's a big ask, the MBA.
It is. Yes, it is. It's intense, I'm not going to lie, but it's the challenge that I had needed for a little while. So it's really good. It's going great.
Okay, brilliant. And because I lecture in the MBA, Joel, close your ears, but I lecture at QUT. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. So I do the 2 leadership subjects there.
Okay.
And I think that does 3 leadership subjects in the MBA. So I do 2 of the 3. So yeah,
great.
So that gives you a bit of an idea. Yeah.
And I think I might have missed. Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Natalie.
I was going to say I might have missed some conversation there. Is Joel doing his MBA as well?
No, but you've finished your master's, Joel. Is that right?
No, I'm doing my master's now. Master's in marketing.
Okay.
Cool.
And what's your role there, Joel? So we've got just a bit of a sense of.
Yeah, so I finished my undergrad in commerce. I majored in financial advising, and I took up a role with the university. I actually am a school engagement officer, so I go out and talk to school kids about university, is my primary role. And I have 50 current students under me that I manage, which is kind of why I'm here to learn about better management. But you also came recommended from a person who teaches management at Griffith. So that's kind of why I'm here. Okay,
brilliant. Look, there's a bit of issues with the audio there, so that's just part of life, isn't it, online? So we'll just struggle through there. Thanks, Joel. And Jareen, if you want to just unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, apologies for the background noise. Yeah, so I've got my own small transport planning business, and it's kind of growing quite rapidly. So that's my motivation behind doing the course. But yeah, Tim, we've worked together before when I worked for a larger company, and Tim had done some training with us, and so Tim, it's probably been like 20 years or something, perhaps 15.
It's a bit of a worry,
our
isn't
age, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, my business is kind of growing rapidly, so it's kind of good to concentrate on getting the team managed well, and efficiencies and all of that is my motivation.
Right, thank you. Yeah, look, we've got a couple of apologies for people who just can't make it to online today. So I think it's actually quite nice to have a small group for a change, and that gives you a chance to ask questions. And I'd like you to participate, because it's not just all about me talking for 6 hours over the course of the program. So I just like to stop at different times and give you a chance to reflect and ask questions and feel comfortable. And my job is to try and create an environment that you do feel comfortable doing that. So what I'll do is I'll just share my screen, and then we'll launch into the topic and just do a bit of a starting preamble, a few details around that. So you might say, well, why am I starting with feedback and why not something else? Well, it's just I've got to start somewhere. So there's no real reason for that. But and you might also be thinking to yourself, well, this is about better conversation. So how can feedback be part of that? I mean, I would argue that feedback should be a conversation between two or even more people. And the trick is really to get the other person engaged in a conversation around feedback. Because I think what happens is otherwise it becomes a one-way type of situation, and the other person can be defensive, or perhaps they're not taking it on board. They don't feel engaged in the process. So I actually see feedback as a critical conversation of leadership. So obviously I'm going to talk about some examples and some ways that you can make that a conversation rather than just a one-way monologue. It should be a dialogue rather than a monologue. So yeah, that's really what that's about. So you can see there's a list of what we're going to be covering, and that's the order to which we'll cover. So as I said, you'll get a copy of the slides and the recording from me at the end of this presentation, and hopefully a link to the book too, with as long as Amazon's come through. They take a bit of time sometimes to sort that out. So let me just sort of give you a bit of an overview. And so obviously feedback is critical, and I think that we do know from research there's a high correlation between people who are engaged and people who are receiving feedback. And unfortunately, the opposite's the case. When people don't receive feedback, whether it's positive or constructive, they often, they're disengaged. So if you're looking at engaging people, then feedback is a great place to start. And an even better place to start is with positive feedback. So there's two types of feedback, obviously. There's positive feedback, and there's what I call constructive feedback rather than negative feedback. So we'll get into that in more detail in a moment. Unit 2, we're going to look at performance boosting conversations, and I'm going to share with you 5 or maybe more conversations and some of the questions that you can ask around that to boost performance, because, and again, it's a conversation. So we'll have a look at that. Unit 3, I mean, whenever there's two people working together, there'll inevitably be conflict. It doesn't have to be a nasty conflict, but there'll always be a difference of point of view or whatever. And the key for all of us is actually to change our style. What normally happens is that we deal with conflict how we feel comfortable dealing with conflict. So, for example, we might avoid it, we might accommodate, as in let the other person get it their way. We might compete, whereas we might dig our heels in. The trouble is the way you're dealing, when you're dealing with someone else, if you're not flexible in the way you deal with that, then it's likely that you're not going to be as effective. So there's a diagnostic I'll get you to complete before we do Unit 3, which is very short, but it just gives you an awareness of what your conflict style is. In Unit 4, we'll look at meetings. And I mean, this is a meeting. And after this is over, you'll probably have another meeting, and it just never ends, does it? But how many good meetings do we actually attend? And, let's be honest, there's very few that we do attend. And I would say that meetings also should be conversations, unless, of course, it's a large meeting where you're giving a presentation. So we're going to talk about some of the ways of making your meetings more effective. And then in Unit 5, I'll get you to do another diagnostic, and it's one around your influencing style, because let's face it, in any situation, whether you're dealing with your clients, whether you're dealing with the public, whether you're dealing with family, whoever it may be, you're trying to probably influence them to think differently or to act differently. And likewise, they're probably trying to do that as well. So there's this argy-bargy going on. And again, it should be a conversation. And the final unit we'll look at is leading change. Obviously, we're living in a world which is going through enormous and unprecedented change. And we need to understand a little bit about the psychology of change and how we might be able to lead people through that change process, which means that your conversations will change at different points throughout the change process. So that's the 6 units, and just a couple of little stats, and then I'll stop because there might be some questions that you've got. So this information comes from Gallup, and it's just interesting to talk about this because it has a huge implication around feedback. So 60% of employees don't understand what their organization's goals are, which is a bit disturbing, but I think you'd probably agree, for those of you who've been in the workforce for a period of time, that is probably true. Now, 87% of people aren't engaged in their work, which I've seen figures from 70 to 87 and, everything in between. But I think what's interesting about that is of those 87, 20% are actually actively disengaged, which means that they're trying to undermine what you're doing. So I know I'm painting a bleak picture here, but I think it's important because I think the antidote to a lot of this is your opportunity to give feedback and to enter into a dialogue around that. 77% of employees say that performance would improve with more feedback. So basically people are saying that, and surveys demonstrate this over and over again, that people are actually after more feedback. Now, this is where it gets interesting. They say they want more feedback, but sometimes when they get the feedback, particularly constructive feedback, they're not particularly happy with the feedback. So it gets confusing, and you think, well, I've seen the surveys, and why isn't this person responding to that? There's 2 different things. People want to know where they stand, but they also sometimes don't like the feedback that they receive. So it can be confusing. 50% of managers fail to hold their team members accountable. And we'll talk about that today a little more around feedback. And 57% of employees say that they want critical feedback that will help them improve. So I'm just painting a picture out there, and I'm sure some of that won't surprise you. Maybe the percentages will, but those issues I think you would be aware of out there in the world of work. So one of the things, just before I stop and pause for a conversation with you, Gallup also, this is a very simplistic chart, but there's a lot behind this, but Gallup went out and surveyed a whole lot of employees, I think something like 9,000. And they basically talked to those employees and identified their engagement levels. And what they found was, and it gets interesting as you go down this list, but those employees who only received what we might call positive feedback are likely to be highly engaged. So that's great. It basically means that, you know, if you can catch people doing things right and you can give people that feedback at that moment, then it's likely that that's going to contribute significantly to engagement levels of those people you're giving feedback to. So that's good news. So when you look at the next line, and this is where it starts to get interesting, that if you only ever gave constructive feedback, or what they call critical feedback, if you only ever did that, in other words, you gave no positive feedback, but you only gave critical feedback, you are going to still have an engaged team, all things being equal. There's all sorts of things. I guess it depends on how you do it and, you know, whether or not it's, you know, reasonably subjective and based on critical incidents and so forth. And we'll talk about all that today. But ultimately, it still means that you're going to have a high level of engagement. But where it's interesting is for those employees who don't receive any feedback, whether it's positive feedback or constructive feedback, it's likely that they're going to be disengaged. And you might think, well, I don't feel comfortable giving feedback all the time, particularly when it's constructive. But if you think about the world we live in, there are rules, regulations, processes, procedures. There's no shortage of key performance indicators and all of these sorts of things. And why is that the case? Well, we human beings actually need to know where we stand. We don't always adhere to those rules, regulations, procedures, and systems, but we at least want to know where they are. And that's, of course, where feedback comes in. So it's interesting, isn't it, that giving no feedback will lead to a level of disengagement, and whereas receiving positive feedback will give you a great degree of engagement, and even giving constructive feedback will give you a fair degree of engagement. So I'm just going to stop there and see if you've got any comments or questions you'd like to ask. Does that ring true? Is that something that you've picked up in your own sort of experience around feedback?
I have definitely picked up in over my years of being a manager that people do want the positive feedback as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to give. And I think sometimes we forget. And I'm going to set you a little bit of homework at the end of each of these sessions, very practical stuff. But I think the homework I'm going to give you is fairly easy. I'm just going to ask you to identify 3 positive things that are happening every day and just say thank you, or whichever way you want to go with that, and just see what an incredible difference that will make, because the majority of people in the workplace will complain that they don't receive enough feedback. And so the first thing is to start giving it, regardless of what it might be. And I think the idea of finding 3 things going right is a good thing, because it forces you to look harder than you probably would otherwise. And I think that, you know, people, I mean, you might say, well, I can't find 3 things. I would say to you that there are 3 things that are going right every day. It's probably that you're just not focusing on that enough. So, yeah, it really makes the difference there. So good feedback. And it's so easy. It's literally as simple as saying thank you. Thanks for speaking up in the meeting this morning. It was really valuable what you said. It took some courage, but you needed to say it. Thank you. Thanks for staying back half an hour after work today to finish that report. I really appreciate that. You know, thanks for keeping you cool when you were dealing with that very difficult and irate customer. it was really a great thing that you were able to do that. So it can be literally that easy. And if you can find 3 opportunities to do that each day, you'll be quite amazed at what difference it will make. And I often say that in large organizations, say, you know, if you take Griffith, for example, Joel, imagine if every single leader at Griffith every single day, and I'm talking about genuine feedback, were giving 3 bits of positive feedback every day. Can you imagine the difference that would make in terms of morale across the organization? It would be phenomenal, wouldn't it? Because it would just sort of be infectious. Hello, Gary. You made it. You've just got to unmute yourself on the left, down the bottom on the left hand. There's a little, yeah, there he is. How are you?
Yeah, good. Finally got
it. Long time no see.
No, mate, I don't know what's going on. I get some of your emails and not this obviously link, and Natalia's just come through now.
Wow.
So
yeah.
Something's going on. Sorry.
No, that's all right. I just, when you text me, I just assumed that you'd got that previous email that I'd sent, the registration email, and you haven't. So I can understand why you sent me the text now. So anyway, you're here. Fantastic.
I'm here.
Okay, we're just getting underway, and I'm just talking about a few stats and interesting information around feedback. And the basic message out of that is, if you're giving regular feedback to people, you will have an engaged or more engaged team than you would otherwise. And I think that human beings have a need to have regular feedback, and that was the key message there. And I just showed some stats around that. Gary, just while you're there, do you want to just give the others in the room a chance to, you know, just give us a sense of what you do, just so we've got a bit of an idea, and then we'll move on.
Oh, yeah. Gary Coyne, I'm a McDonald's licensee. I own 9 restaurants up in the northern part of Brisbane. And we got information yesterday that we're going to open another new store, which I won't disclose because it's under lock and key at the moment, but going to a meeting for that on next Wednesday at McDonald's head office at Aspley in Brisbane. I've been a McDonald's licensee for getting nearly close to 28 years. So it's been quite a while. I'm an ex-rugby league professional sports player, played for the Canberra Raiders, played State of Origin, played for Australia. So went to the highest levels of my sport, and I'd do it again if I could. Enjoyed it immensely. Natalia, my daughter, is the eldest of 2 children that we have. She's on today. Hey, Duff, how are you? And our son Jordan,
Hey, Dad.
who they both live in Los Angeles at the moment, and our son Jordan is a music producer in Los Angeles. And I've known Tim for quite a while. Tim,
Yes.
I'm part of a business forum group in Brisbane here called YPO, and it's a business leadership group. And yeah, we get some very intelligent, educated men like Tim that come along and talk to us from time to time. And I've had Tim come and speak to my senior management team at McDonald's as well. So no, that's me.
Thanks, Gary. That's great. And so we've got a really good mix of people in the room who are all diverse sort of backgrounds, which is very, very interesting. So yeah, that's incredible. So 10 stores, you lose count of what's going on.
Yeah. Well, we employ over 1,000 people too. So we'll be getting to about 1,100 very shortly. So yeah, it's as Natalia knows, she ran the business for 12 years. So it's a big job.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gary. I'm glad you're on board. I'll just share the screen now and we'll keep going.
Yeah.
All right. So let me just move on. And look, this statement, I just say this to you that, and this is very true, I find, in the corporate world, that, you know, we have this once a year performance review. And by the way, I'm not a great fan of the performance review, but I won't get wound up and get into that. And I'll just leave that for our next session because it's around performance. But look, if you know, at a performance review, if that's the only time people receive feedback from you, then it's better than nothing, but it's a problem. And you could probably understand why. Because if you're sitting down with someone, having a conversation with them about their performance, and something happened 9 months ago, and let's say it was something very positive, right? So it's positive feedback. And you said to that person, look, I just wanted to thank you for the work that you did 9 months ago when you were dealing with X or Y or whatever it was. They're probably sitting there thinking to themselves, well, if it was that good, wouldn't Gary or someone else have told me that earlier? In other words, it loses its impact because people are sitting there thinking, well, that happened a long time ago. And of course, the other problem is you can't remember everything that happened anyway. Some things will stand out more than others. So I would say that the key thing for all of us, me included, is to try every day to be giving feedback and to do it in a way, and obviously I'm going to run through how to do that. But at the end of the day, I think it's an ongoing, moment by moment, day by day situation. Because if you don't do that, it's going to lose its impact when it comes to doing it formally at the review. So just food for thought there. So here's a little exercise I do want to do, and I'm just going to give you a little chance. I'm going to give you an opportunity to. I'm going to put you in a breakout room for a moment, and you're going to work with another person. And really, it's a very simple exercise, simple in one way, but not in another. And I just want to make a really important point here, and hopefully this will help. So there's basically 3 rules. So you're going to be having a conversation with somebody very shortly, only 2 of you, and I'm going to put you in a breakout room. And basically, this is the rules. If you break any of these rules, so if you're competitive, then you'll enjoy this. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you break any of these rules, you've lost, right? So you'll have to work out whether you've broken those rules or not. But the first rule is you can't answer the question. So basically, if I was having a conversation with Natalia and I said to Natalia, do you like fishing? And if Natalia said to me, yes, I do, she's lost. So you can't answer the question, which is you'll find this is very, very difficult. So what do? Well, you ask another question back. So it goes question, 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 question. All right. So the idea is you can't repeat the question. So if I said to Natalia, do you like fishing? She can't turn around and say, do you like fishing? So it's got to be a different question. However, you can't change the topic. So whoever starts this has to, that becomes the topic of conversation for the duration. All right. So you'll find this incredibly difficult, more than you think. Is everyone clear about that? So you can't answer the question. So someone starts with a question. You can't repeat the question and you can't change the topic. Okay. So let me now put you into I'll just get out of that for a moment and I'll put you into a breakout room. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to how are we going? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we've got 4. Perfect. So I'm going to create 2 breakout rooms and I'm going to do it automatically. So who knows who will end up with whom. You'll get a little message here, accept it, and then try those 3. And I'm just going to give you about 5 minutes and then we'll call you back and I want to see what your reaction is to that. So there we go. So you just have to click on the link and you'll go into a room and good luck.
Tim, I think you might be on mute.
Yep, there we go.
All right, folks, how did you go? I just had a little eavesdrop and I realised that people found that more difficult, and I thought you would. What was so difficult about that? And there's a really important point here, because this goes to the heart of what we're on about with feedback. Why was it so difficult?
I think it was difficult because we weren't able to answer the question first,
Yes.
and kind of make it more of a conversation, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why I gave you a little thing here to do, and you even knew the rules, and some of you still found it impossible not to answer the question. So here's the important point. We've been conditioned since the year dot to answer questions. So we go around to grandma's place, grandma asks us a question, we ignore grandma, we get a little clip under the ear, always answer grandma when she asks you a question. We go to school and we're staring out the window and someone says, what's the capital of Australia? And we just miss it. We get into trouble. We go to work, we ask a question from our team, our team member, our team leader, can't answer it. We don't answer it, we get into trouble. We have been socialized to answer questions. Now, here's the good news for you. If you ask questions of other people, you will get answers. You may not get the answer you want, but you will get answers, because the other person will be under the same pressure. That's why I'm saying it's really, really important to ask questions and make feedback a conversation. So it's not about you just, rattling off what you think. You've got to get the other person engaged. The good news is the best way to get anybody engaged is to ask them an open-ended question. Why, what, when, who, where, how, and which. Now, the other thing that's interesting about that exercise, who had control, if I could say, was it the person asking or the person on the receiving end?
I believe the person who asking.
Yeah, because you're sitting back thinking, how am I going to deal with this? And it's a bit like the person that has the most control in a conversation, I will guarantee to you, is the person asking the majority of questions. Now, if you doubt that, think about a journo who might be interviewing a politician. Of course, the politician doesn't answer the question the way the journalist would like. We get that. But the journalist's in complete control, because they've got the iPad or they're driving it where they want it to go. So my comment to you is that I'm just giving you an insight here, that if you're trying to get the other person engaged, ask them questions. So a good question to start with is, let's say someone's done a job for you. And this works really well in a remote environment as well. So you don't have to be there. You can actually say to the other person, how did you go? What did you do well? What don't you think you did so well in? And is there anything that you'd do differently next time? So they're completely engaged in that. So you've got them engaged because they can't help but to answer the question. So don't think about feedback as a one-way thing. Think about it as a conversation. So what I'm going to do now is share some pointers around how to do this more effectively. So let me go through to my slides. So let's go. I'll leave that one. So I'm just going to go through 7 quick questions that you need to be able to ask yourself, because this is important. So when you're setting expectations as a leader, the very fundamental question is, what are your expectations of other people? Are you clear about that? I suspect that all of you are clear about it, but people aren't mind readers. So obviously the next key question is, have you communicated those expectations to other people? So how do you do that? Well, you can do it in a team meeting, and that's okay. But the most effective way of doing that is to do that in a feedback session, because there's no wriggle room. They're right in front of you, and it's clear what your expectations are. But that's not the end of it. The third question is, do they understand the expectations? Do they understand the context? Do they understand why those expectations are as they are? Have you given them an explanation around that? Because people will nod dutifully, but that doesn't necessarily mean they understand the expectation. And the fourth key one is, do they accept it? So, for example, if you gave someone an expectation that they didn't believe that they could meet, then they don't accept the expectation. Then they're not going to tell you that. They just will fall short of the mark. And then you'll get frustrated with them and wonder why that's the case. So the fifth question is, are they committed to meeting that expectation? Most times when you give someone a job to do, they've probably got 10 other things they need to do. So your expectation is one of 10 things, and it may well get left off the list. Here's a really good question that you can ask somebody, and it's a respectful question. You can say to someone, can I get your commitment to get this done by the close of business today? Now, that's not a disrespectful question. It's in your head anyway. Why not say it? Now, what you're looking for is a nod or a grunt or a yes. If you get a nod or a grunt or a yes, you've got them committed. And if you don't get a nod or a grunt or a yes, then you can actually follow it up with another question saying, it doesn't sound like you're committed. Is that right? Or, what's going on? So ask people for their commitment. It's a reasonable thing to do because you want it anyway. So why not ask for it? And don't expect it just because you'll be disappointed at times because people have got lots of things they're juggling in the air. Do people know how they're performing against those expectations? Now, how do you let people know? Obviously, it's feedback. That's the key. And the last question, particularly those of you working in largish organisations, am I supporting my team members to achieve those expectations? Are you removing roadblocks? So, for example, Joel, if in your line of work, there's an internal service provider who's expected to give you some information that you can pass on, and they haven't done that, then obviously that's impacting on your ability to communicate with whoever it is you're communicating with. So a good leader will remove roadblocks because there should be no excuses for not meeting expectations. So you can see it's quite complex. And this is why people don't always meet leaders' expectations, because there's so much there. There's so many things that could potentially go wrong. So the key is to just think through, wonder why this person isn't following through on this. Is it because they're not clear about the expectation? Is it because they don't understand it? Is it that they don't accept it? Is it they're not committed? Is it because there are roadblocks everywhere? Is it because I haven't given them feedback? So just a thought around that. So just make sure that you do that right, and people will rise to that occasion given an opportunity. Here's some things to think about. Timing's everything in basically life, isn't it? Feedback's no different. The best time to give feedback is as soon after the issue or the event or whatever it is. In fact, down tools and give the feedback immediately. A lot of people will often say, particularly with constructive feedback, they'll say, I'll wait until Monday. I'll let them cool down a bit and I'll wait until Monday. Well, that's a good excuse, but the truth of the matter is that by the time Monday rocks around, they've probably forgotten most of it anyway. But remember, if you sat down with someone and gave them feedback immediately after, say it was a positive thing or it wasn't a positive thing, the message that they're getting from you is that this must be important because Gary is downing tools just to give me this feedback. So in other words, it's more impactful. Apart from that, of course, it's fresh in someone's mind. So, I mean, there are times where obviously you could be under pressure doing something else and it may not. But the point is, as soon after the event or the situation, the better, because that's the moment to strike, because that's and it's positive as well. So let's say someone spoke up in a meeting this morning and they showed a lot of courage. They put something on the table. So straight after that meeting, there's your opportunity. Pull them up in the corridor and just say, thank you. It was really important what you said this morning, and I really appreciate it. Now that's going to have a huge impact. If you left that for a week and said to that person, look, I didn't get a chance, but I remember last week at the meeting, you did a great job at putting something on the table that needed to be, thank you. That's still reasonable, but it's certainly not as good as straight after the meeting, is it? So timing is everything. Now, the hard one, it's being specific about it. And what that means is that you can't generalize. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. So you can't, so for example, I mean, here's an example that you probably realize wouldn't work well. But if you said to someone, I want to talk to you about your rotten attitude, well, that's not going to go well. That is not going to go well. You're wasting your time, even if you're frustrated and you believe that. A far better way of saying that would be, look, the last 3 mornings in a row, I've noticed you've turned up late to work. See how that's specific? And that's more of a symptom of what happened rather than being personal. Let me give you a couple of examples. Let's say you gave this feedback to someone. Overall, good job on the presentation at this morning's meeting, but it could have been better. Now, if I gave you that feedback, what would you think? Anyone like to just unmute themselves and tell me? What would you think? Joel, what would you think if I said to you, great job presentation this morning, but it could have been better? What would your instant reaction be?
Well, you've just kind of left the door open on what could be better.
Exactly. And I might not be feeling quite comfortable to say, Joel, what did I do wrong? So I'm walking away wondering what didn't Tim like about this? So here's a better way of doing it. Great job on the presentation. I really like the way you use statistics to back up your key points. One small comment, maybe for next time you could invite more comments from the group and get them more involved. Now that will land well, because I now know what you liked about it, the fact that I used, statistics, but I also have got something here that's useful. And I might actually, if you gave me that feedback, I might actually say to you, I might say, yeah, you're right, I was a bit nervous and I probably should have stopped and I probably should have asked a few more questions. So you see the difference? Now, the key for you is that before you walk up to someone and give them the feedback, you've got to think in your head, how can I express this that's specific? Now, there's a lot of rubbish that's written about this. Some people, and I won't swear online, but you've all heard of the so-called sandwich. There's a piece of bread, what's in the middle, and another piece of bread. And what the argument is that you're supposed to start off saying something really positive, then you hit them right between the eyes, and then you finish it off with something positive. That's rubbish, because you're not being authentic. Be authentic. It is something I need you to fix. I need you to work on, because otherwise the person's not going to get the right idea and you've buried it all between 2 pieces of bread. So if you're specific about it and you do it regularly, people start saying, okay, at least I know where I stand, with Jareen, because Jareen, she gives me very specific feedback and it works really well. So think carefully before you open your mouth, because unfortunately, once you've opened your mouth, it's not easy to go backtracking. But of course, if you do make a mistake, I always think a great thing to do is to go back and say, look, what I said yesterday, I didn't express it well, and I apologize for that. I should have thought more carefully about how I said it, but this is what I meant. So you do get a second bite of the cherry, but I think the idea is not to make that mistake if possible. So specifics very important. I've said this earlier, it's really, really important to be giving regular feedback, moment by moment, situation by situation. Very, very important. Daily feedback is the go. and ask questions. Now, you saw from that little exercise we did how difficult it is not to answer questions. So why, what, when, who, where, how, and which. Ask questions, be curious. If you're worried about asking questions and how the other person might perceive it, ask this question. Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions so that I can understand what happened? Now, no one's going to say no to that. And they're going to say yes. And now I have a license to ask some open-ended questions and not feel as if I'm being a detective. So that might work well for you too. Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions so I can understand what happened? And then, of course, you can go and ask a lot of questions around that. Now, there is a concept called praise in public and criticize in private. I'm actually not sure about that. I know that there are people who are very shy, who are introvert, who do not like being the center of attention at all. So if you had a team meeting and you said, for example, Gary, I just wanted to praise you about X, Y, and Z, that's all very nice. But the person there might be squirming in their seat because they don't like having that spotlight put on them. It's more effective if you actually did that one-on-one because you're there with them. And I find from my experience that some leaders do this not because they want to give feedback, but they want to be seen to be giving feedback. In other words, they're doing it as a performance rather than really being genuine about it. So I would argue praise in private and criticize in private wherever possible. Now, obviously, if it was a team effort, that's a different story. You get the team there and you let them know that you're really pleased with how they performed on that shift or how they did. That's great. Go ahead and do that. But I think it's too risky otherwise because not everyone likes the spotlight put on them, and that's important to recognize. Use incidents, use practical examples to illustrate what you're doing. Why you're giving this feedback. In other words, and of course, the sooner you do this after the event, the obviously the clearer the incident is, and the people can link the feedback to what actually happened as such, and that's important. And finally, focus on the future. Now, what I mean by that is that when you're giving feedback to someone, you're only doing it for one reason or two reasons. If you're giving positive feedback to someone, you're doing it because you want to reinforce them to do that over and over again, right? That's the only reason you're giving positive feedback. You're wanting them to continue that behavior again or do that again. If you're giving constructive feedback, you're doing that because you want them to alter their behavior in the future. So you see, it's all about the future. And I raise this with you because a lot of people want to wallow around and talk about the past. To some degree, you need to know what's happening, but really at the end, it's all about behavior change in the future. So you can feel very comfortable saying to someone, if they want to keep talking about the past, is to just say, look, that's gone. The reason I'm giving you this feedback is that I want you to think about changing that behavior next time. That's what it's all about. So very, very important there as such to do. So I might just pause there. It's a lot of stuff I've gone through in a very short space of time, but are there any questions, comments, observations? Go for your life, because I want to try and make this as interactive as I can, and having a small group, we can do that.
I'll say something up front to back up what you just said about, praise in public, and criticize, elaborate more in private. The one person who I know who has done that extremely well, I've experienced him because I had him as a coach, is Wayne Bennett. That is Wayne Bennett's philosophy. That's how he gets to the team. He protects the team in the media, in the public eye. He gets you in the locker room and he'll tear strips off you. And and then the other end, he'll protect the team in the public eye. That's why he doesn't come across well in the media. But then in the meeting room, he will praise you or he will tear strips off you. And he will do that in front of your teammates.
Yes.
And then you walk out of the room and that's it. That is Wayne Bennett's secret. He is a coach, don't get me wrong, but he's a man manager. And that's the secret to his philosophy and his longevity in the sport is he gets to the individual, then he brings those individuals all together and they play as a team.
Yeah, no, I got that impression from a distance, Gary, and I think he's a master of that. Yeah, and it's all about one-on-one communication. I think at the end of the day, you're trying to build good working relationships with each individual person, and that's a private conversation. It's not a public thing. So I find it hugely destructive when people are bawling people out in front of other people. First of all, they're not listening. Right? Because they're defending themselves. And secondly, other people are sitting in that room thinking, that's not very pleasant. First of all, I'm glad it's not me. And secondly, I feel sorry for that person. And thirdly, I don't think that leader has done the right thing by doing that publicly. So you're not going to win that way. So try to have your conversations in the corridor or in a meeting room or wherever you feel comfortable with. Thanks, Gary. Yep. Joel, any comments, questions, observations before we wrap up?
No, that was good. I think not a problem that I have, but being the one who's like funneling feedback through is also quite challenging because sometimes we have like our mentors or our students who are out and about and I'm not there, but then I'm getting feedback from others and I'm trying to basically funnel it through and you don't want to be, I don't know, because you weren't there, you don't want to provide any feedback that wasn't correct, but you don't want to get into that whole argument with them. So it is tricky sometimes, but there's some great advice there.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Natalia, anything for you that you want?
Just to back you up with those one-on-one relationships, that has been really, really effective for me in the past in bringing the whole team together.
Yeah, look, if you bring it all down to one simple message, leadership is a relationship. And what that means, I don't mean a personal relationship, obviously, a working relationship. And if you think about it, how can you have a relationship with anybody? Can you do it via text and email? Not really. You can only do it one conversation at a time. And I think, if you look at the people who are really good at this, and Gary mentioned one person that's in the public eye, you will find that they are brilliant at one-on-one interaction. That's the essence of it all. Because if you build a good relationship up with that person, that is a trusting working relationship, constructive, you're miles ahead. Yeah. Jareen, anything from you before we wrap up?
I think that was really useful. I guess just questions in my mind. As you know, my business model is everyone's working from home and they've got their tasks to do. And so just that daily feedback, sometimes I might look at what they've done, for a couple of days when they've done it. So I guess I'm just trying to think through, just ways I can change what I do that might have more contact on a daily basis.
Yes.
Yeah, because I can see the benefits of that. And it's probably something that I'm lacking. So, just trying to think through ways to do that. It's probably, more questions for me and, my processes.
Yeah. So, Jareen, one of the things I'd suggest is 3 key questions. So let's say someone's doing a job for you, but they're not in the room. They're doing it somewhere else, right? So one of the questions is, you just finished, putting a report together because that's part of your line of work, I know. And you could say, what did you like? What did you think went well preparing that report? So you start with a positive. And it's like pulling teeth. Some people don't want to tell you what they did well. Well, just ask them, what do you think went well? What's one thing that you did that you really thought went well? And then you say, what's one area that perhaps didn't go as well? Well, what's one part of that project that didn't? And the third question is, what would you do differently next time?
Yeah.
So you don't have to be there. You don't have to be there.
Yeah.
And
That part I'm okay with.
yeah.
It's more just the daily kind of interaction and, feedback. Because, as you know, a report might take 5 days to write. So, and I'm looking at it on day 5 and, unless they've got questions and stuff like that. So I probably, can be still checking in every day and just, on progress and using that as a way to feedback or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's great. So homework, folks, before we meet next Friday is simple. I want you to get into a habit, if you're not already doing it, of giving 3 positive bits of feedback every day. And that could just be a thank you. And I want you to come back next Friday and tell me what happened. Now, if you're not used to doing this, you'll be blown away at what will happen after a period of time. And it's got to be genuine. I mean, you've still got to find 3 things, but it's got to be genuine and let people know. And it could just simply be a thank you. I really appreciate the way you stayed back to finish that report yesterday. That was great. And I really appreciate the fact that you did that. I really appreciate the way you kept your calm dealing with that customer. That customer was clearly out of control and you didn't bite. And I just want to thank you for that because I thought that was superb. So whatever it might be, and then come back and tell me what happened. And we'll just share a bit of knowledge. And next Friday, we'll get into performance conversations. And I'll be sending you a copy of the slides and the recording from today. And Gary will still have to sort of resolve how we're going to get that all sorted out. But I guess the point is it may not just be me. There might be other people that are getting or not, their emails are landing. So, yeah, we'll have to sort that one out. All right. Thanks, everyone. All the best. Have a great weekend and catch you Friday next. Cheers.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, everyone.
Great
See ya.
meeting, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.